How many of you remember the high holidays? It was in all the newspapers. It comes around September when the leaves turn brown. Now, for the sake of this story, you're going to have to grant me something. It may shock some of you out there, so hold on to your friends who are sitting around you. How many would you grant me that the synagogues in America are not packed every Saturday morning? Right? There's room to stuff an extra Jew or two in. But it comes to high holidays, it's amazing. The synagogues are packed. You see Jews you've never seen before. More than that, you see places in the synagogue you've never seen before. People are opening up curtains. We have a synagogue out in my way that seats people in closets and has periscopes looking out. It's an amazing thing. Somehow, people love the high holidays. And let me give you a story about a small suburban synagogue that every year prides itself on having a traditional Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur service. And they get a crowd, 1,500 people. They pack the place. You know, all these suburban synagogues are built lengthwise so they can have curtains to keep opening and opening and opening. It's the afternoon of Yom Kippur. The Ne'ilah service is about to begin. The sun is just beginning to set. And the aged chazan, the cantor, who's 88 years old, gets up and is about to start the most holy service of the year. And it finally happens. Nothing. Garnished. It gives out. This pearly voice of 88 years old gives out. What to do? What to do? The president of the shul doesn't know what to do. He starts inquiring with the board. If they wait till after Yom Kippur and ask for another cantor to come from another town, people are going to die chalosh away. They've been fasting for 24 hours. He figures, what does he have to lose? He'll go and he'll ask the congregation. Perhaps there's a volunteer who could help them finish the service the way they're used to. He gets up on the pulpit, he looks out at this vast crowd, and he says, is there anyone out there who knows the nusach, the tune, so we could finish the service as we have for the last 57 years? And all you hear is a sound of 1,500 pairs of eyeballs receding into the top of people's heads. An awesome sound. Is there anyone out there who knows the Hebrew? It's okay, we'll hum along. We don't need to have the tune. The Hebrew. Not a reaction. Everyone's afraid to volunteer. The minute you volunteer, you know what happens? They put you on the board. Finally, is there anyone out there who knows it in English? It's okay, we'll do it in English. God understands English, but not a sound. Finally, out of desperation, he looks around one last time and says, please, and an old man sitting way in the back gets up and everyone's head turns. Perhaps this old man remembers something of this service. Perhaps he can help us finish it the way he was for 57 years. And the old man looks kind of startled and embarrassed, says, no, it isn't me, it's my dog. Well, he gets a bigger laugh than I just got here in the studio, that's for sure. And they try to ignore him. They figure he's a kook, you know, some strange guy who comes into the service. But, you know, shuls are run by boards, thank God. And pulling the leg of the president is the financial secretary. He says, listen, we can't disappoint the people. If the dog can do it, let him do it. What, there's a long shul, maybe, you know, what? The ritual director is pulling on the other sleeve. What are you, crazy? You can't have a dog do this. This is not a zoo, it's a shul. You're nuts. But thank God the Jewish people know how to compromise. And after a few minutes, they agree that if the little dog is willing to wear a little yarmulke and a little prayer shawl, a tallis, maybe they can get away with it. And sure enough, ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments, a white and tan shaggy dog wearing a little yarmulke and one of those new Japanese inflatable prayer shawls, the ones that we all love, gets up on the bimah, and no one was prepared for what was to follow because that dog daven, he was unbelievable. What a chazan, what a cantor. People were literally, tears were streaming down their faces. Fanny Goldstein, the head of the sisterhood, she, after the services were over, signed an affidavit that said that at one point she saw the dog close the siddur and read the prayers that were written on the sky. Remarkable, remarkable dog. The service comes to a triumphant end. The shofar is blown and people are sitting still. You know what usually happens after the service? They're trampling each other to get to the parking lot, right? Still. And the president gets up and he speaks for the entire congregation when he talks to the owner of the dog, and he says, that dog's terrific. You should sign that dog up with CBS now that Richard Tucker is dead. That dog can take over. What a wonderful dog. He could be the greatest cantor in the world. And the owner of the dog looks at the president and says, you talk to him, Nebuch. You talk to him. He wants to be a doctor.
Shalom. Welcome to Hayom. I'm Rabbi Arnold Rachlis. As you can see, our guest is funny, humorous, Jewish. He is a badchan, a humorist, a lecturer at Clark University in Worcester. He is Moshe Waldoks. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hayom,
with us.
Hayom, Hayom.
Hayom means today, as you know, and
right.
we're going to talk
You don't
today.
look like Jane Pauley. I thought you looked like Jane Pauley. They told me I'd be on the Hayom show.
You don't look like Brian Gumbel.
Well, I was in Florida. All right.
Let's talk.
Sure.
What is Jewish humor?
It's very hard. It's like talking about God. You know, you have to talk in negative attributes. Look, first of all, Jewish humor deals with Jews. Okay, deals with Jewish life, deals with internal things of the Jewish community. But clearly, I can tell you what it isn't. It isn't slapstick, even though I love slapstick humor, but it isn't Jewish. It isn't necessarily cruel or victimizing, meaning Jewish humor still has a bit of that 19th century flavor to it where the underdog is still important, right? The schnorrer somehow prevails over the rich man. The only rich man, by the way, who gets good press in Jewish humor is Rothschild, is the only one. Then you've got the fact that it also parodies traditional forms and serves, as I like to see it, as a contemporary midrash, meaning a contemporary interpretation of events by parodying traditional forms, whether it's Purim Torah or whether it's modern interpretations of the Bible, etc. So it's really anything that deals with the Jewish experience in a funny way.
Why do you think there's so many Jewish comedians? I mean, when you think in contemporary America, George Burns, Walter Matthau, Joan Rivers, Lenny Bruce, you know,
right.
Mel
He used to
Brooks.
be Joan Rivers at one time. Right.
You know, there's so many, and they're different kinds, but they're. Right. What is it of the Jewish experience that makes people want to be comedians?
Okay, I think that we have to make a distinction between what was going on in Eastern Europe and what's going on in the United States. In the United States, in the last 50 years, it's clear that the Jewish contribution to American humor is immense. If you would take out the Jews who are active in the humor field, you get left with 3 Protestants, you know, and a Catholic. And they would admit it, be the first to admit it. Carson and Letterman, you know, they're always afraid their foreskin is going to fall off at any minute, you know, because there's a very Jewish kind of business. But I think it's something I heard from Milton Himmelfarb, who I don't usually quote, who said it's a Jewish reaction, if you will, to marginality.
So it's the powerlessness that Jews
Right, it's
feel.
a way of, meaning that the Jewish comedian is accepted. His vision is accepted by the non-Jewish community because it's bound to be more real than the mainstream vision, meaning that he sees America in a more clear way because he's on the outside.
Sort of like the emperor without clothes.
Right.
That Jews, but as Jews become more acculturated, as they have been over the past few generations, why haven't the number of Jews involved in American humor declined?
Well, I think it's basically, I think, because Jews really created American humor as we know it, in the media that we know it, which is basically the stand-up. The idea of the stand-up is a very primarily Jewish kind of experience. The first stand-up we know about in the tradition is probably Herschel Osterpohler, who was a court jester in the court of a Hasidic rabbi named Baruch of Mezhebush. What a funny name. Mezhebush. It's funny, right? He laughed right away. Mezhebush. He's laughing and he doesn't even know what it means. So we have that tradition of stand-up comics that goes back a long way. And I think we brought a medium, we brought an idea of, I call it the spritz, or the Jewish jazz. The idea that you can get up there and you can really, as Lenny Bruce said, he needs 10,000 people in front of him to do his introspection. And I think that was so effective that Jews have continued to do it. But I would like to see more Jewish comics doing Jewish humor rather than only American humor.
I mean, let's say somebody like Jack Benny, well-known Jew who was a comic, but really no Jewish humor, whereas let's say Myron Cohen, or it might not be, Myron Cohen's humor might not be so much the humor of this younger generation, but certainly he reflected the humor of people who are now in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and older.
And he had a very good protective device. I mean, his gimmick was a great gimmick. He was a great storyteller, so he was able to tell Irish stories as well as Jewish stories and do it well. You have Sam Levinson, on the other hand, who's another example. And bear in mind that Sam Levinson and Lenny Bruce were both coming out at the same time in the United States. Show you how weird we are, right? And Sam Levinson, who started off very Jewish, as someone expressing this immigrant experience, in his stories, for instance, mothers are still positive characters. There are no Jewish mothers in Sam Levinson. He slowly became more successful, became more parav, not milchiks, not fleshik. So by the end, you weren't sure where he was from.
Sam Levinson became everyman. And that's what happens with the fact that we have such a wide popular culture, that we lose a lot of our specifics, and it's really a shame in a way.
Well, it's said that there's a lot of anger implicit in humor. Someone who's willing to get up in front of people and, make fun of himself, make fun of them, make fun of the world. A lot of anger in that.
Right.
Do you think humorists, when they lose their anger, they lose their ability to be funny?
Well, Samuel Levinson would be a case in point, where he obviously was never really an angry comic and still worked. He also had a great gimmick too, right? He used to laugh before the joke was over.
So you would be forced to laugh
right,
too, right?
Oh, sorry, it's so funny. You know, it's like he would sort of convince you, well, it must be funny, the man is sitting here in front of me laughing. Yeah, there's a certain hostility that is important for certain kinds of comics. I think there has to be some anger, and I think that the anger shouldn't become inhumane. I don't think Jewish humor traditionally ever, as I said, became cruel. It was more in the Hasidic mode of challenging God. You know, like the famous Levi Yitzchak story, where the Jew comes in on Erev Yom Kippur and he tells God, well, you know, this year you had all these babies died and we had pogroms and this and that, and I wasn't that good either. You know, let's call it quits. And then Levi Yitzchak gets angry at the Jew and says, why did you let God off so easy? And that's it. The comic doesn't want to let you off easy. However, a good sense of humor is that one can really get into you. And a good sense of humor means that you will laugh rather than get depressed, go home and commit suicide. Right? That's a good sense of humor.
Do you think that there's something, that there are limits to Jewish humor? I mean, you're saying now there's an emphasis within Jewish humor not to hurt too much, right? Would you say that that's, for instance, a Don Rickles or a Joan Rivers, who, you know, both Jewish, they both sort of not more than banter with their audience. They, they really fight their audience. They insult their audience. Is that going too far beyond what we know of as Jewish humor?
It wouldn't be so bad if Rachlis wouldn't apologize all the time about it. I mean, if that was his persona, Ray Rachlis now is getting guilty by being so hostile. So at the end of every show, he says, "I'm only kidding," you know. And he says, like his famous routine is a couple of Arabs in the audience, and he goes, "I love these people. Stand up, please. Stand up and let everybody applaud for these wonderful Arab people, our cousins." Okay, fire! Yeah, I think you can go too far, but not if you're making fun of things worthy of being made fun of, and that's where I think the Jewish community has to really work on itself. The last 25 years, we've lost our sense of humor.
Is there such a thing as offensive Jewish humor? I'll give you an example. If a Jew like Myron Cohen tells a story about two Jewish ladies in Miami Beach, almost no matter what he says about them, it's all right, because it's Myron Cohen, right? Mm-hmm. If a non-Jewish comedian tells a joke about two ladies in Miami Beach, and the joke focuses on Jewish aggressiveness or lust after money or any of the stereotypes, does that become offensive humor? Does it depend on who is telling the joke?
Right. I think you have to examine, as we say in our introduction to the book, examine the singer rather than the song. It's true. I learned something from Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory often said, you know, the word nigger, is it an offensive word to you? He was asked, is it offensive? He says, it matters who's saying it. If it's my wife, as I get up in the morning and she blows in my ear and says, "Hey, little nigger, get up," it's a lot different than an Alabama State Trooper saying it. Meaning that really you have to look at the address of where it's coming from. However, there have been some wonderful comics, non-Jewish comics. Danny Thomas, more particularly. Everybody thinks he's Jewish anyway. He's not. I hate to break it to you. Who have used Jewish material. He does a wonderful joke about the parrot.
I don't know that.
You know, the odds you get on Yom Kippur?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know that joke? Oh, it's about a wonderful guy, a man who loves the races, a Jewish man, a bachelor. He's 48 years old. He loves the horse races. He loves betting on stuff. And he's getting kind of lonely in his life, and his friends suggest, why does he get a pet? So he says, sure enough, goes to the pet store and he sees a parrot. And the guy says, "Is it a good parrot?" "Good parrot." He says, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, well, I'll buy it." He takes the parrot home and he starts playing his favorite cantorial records for this parrot. And after about 6 months, the parrot is absolutely fantastic. He mimics all of the great cantors. He calls the parrot Yossele Rosenberg. He says, "This is a wonderful parrot." This was on for about a year. After a while, you know, he tells his friends at the track about this, and they say, "You know, he's so good. Why did you get him to be a chazan for the high holidays?" He says, "What's a parrot? You can't have a parrot be a chazan." I'm doing a lot of chazan jokes there. You can't get a parrot for the holidays. He says, "Look, try it." So So, sure enough, he goes home and he buys a little yarmulke for the parrot, a little talis, a little suit, and he brings him down to shul on Rosh Hashanah, and he walks in with this parrot, and they want to stop him. He says, no, before you stop me, I want you to know this parrot is the best chazan you ever heard in your lives. And of course, he says, I bet you he isn't. And pretty soon, everybody's got money on this parrot. Even the rabbi puts in a couple of bucks to hear this parrot, and they're all sure that nothing's going to happen. Well, he's got a pot of maybe $1,500. The parrot gets up there, and he's about to begin. Nothing. The owner is pushing the parrot. Nothing. Nothing. Well, he's really, really angry at this parrot. He grabs and runs home, takes out a boy, what should I have said? I've never been so embarrassed in my life. This is all over for you. He's about to lift a knife and slit his throat, and the parrot screams out, stop! Stop! Look at the odds, you'll get Yom Kippur.
You know, this book of yours, the Big Book of Jewish Humor, is filled with stories like that. When you did the research on this book, did you go into the roots of Jewish humor within the tradition? In other words, is the Bible funny? Is the Talmud funny?
Glad you asked. Aside from the flood, which is slapstick, you see.
It's slapstick.
Not very Jewish.
How is it slapstick?
I mean, all that mud and rain, not very Jewish. No, there really isn't any humor in the Bible. I think a lot of people, every time you see a book called The Wit of the Bible, you know it's not funny. Wit and wisdom is not funny. Talmud a little bit, we'd start beginning to see. But basically the rabbis understood the need for humor, so they did include one funny book in the Bible. The Bible was really a lot of sex and violence in it. It's amazing they teach it to kids. It's called the Book of Esther. And the Book of Esther was a conscious, I believe, a conscious move on the part of the rabbis to put something light in. And they were so concerned about its light nature that in order to mitigate some of the hotheads or the black hats of those days, they said, okay, we won't mention God's name in it. So we have here a book of the Bible without God's name in it, dealing with a rather folk-tale-ish kind of event with I always like to see it as an old Dudley Do-Right kind of thing, you know, with Snidely Whiplash, and it's really a fun story. And that became a basis for, as you know, the folk tradition of the Purim Spiel. And the Purim Spiel really is very old, about 2,000.
Tell us about the Purim Spiel, the tradition of...
Well, it began, as I said, almost immediately with the introduction of Purim as a rabbinic holiday. It originally began by groups of people performing on the day of Purim the story of the Megillah, of the Scroll of Esther. After about 400 years, it got boring, you know, because you do it every year and you know the ending. They started stretching it to other parts of the Bible. And that's what the remarkable thing is, that other figures in the Bible that were up to that time taken quite seriously became part of Purim Spiel. The most famous one in Eastern Europe, for instance, was the Mechiras Yosef Spiel, the selling of Joseph play, which was a very good play because it had a cast of thousands. It had to have 12 sons. Some people had the daughter, father, mother, generation gap, real soap opera. And when you went from house to house, right, to do the play and collect money, Heintis Purim, Morgan, Zois, come up progression, Bar from Arois. When you did that, when you came in with 17 kids, people would give you money. They'd be afraid. So they give you money and say, don't break anything, and go on to the next house. And this went on for about 2,000 years, till the 19th century. And in the 19th century, we begin to find the beginnings of the formal Jewish humor that we know in Eastern Europe.
But you're saying other than Purim time, you don't think there's any
one more time, right? One more time.
Torah? What about Simchas Torah?
Not humor,
Okay.
joy. You get a little joy. However, they did begin to realize that one day a year for institutionalized absurdity wasn't enough. So, as you mentioned in the beginning, the Batchen began to emerge. And the Batchen was a jester who primarily worked weddings. He was a compere, an MC. And his job was to literally direct the proceedings at the wedding. He would usually speak in rhyme, and he would direct, for instance, his remarks towards the new bride and tell her how miserable married life is. These were usually kids married at 14, 15 years old. How miserable in-laws are. He would tell the truth. And that would get everybody very tense, and everybody would laugh in order to say, he's only kidding. And the Batchen really worked for about 400, 500 years as a major institution of Jewish life.
Let's talk about Badchanim. Were these Badchanim full-time? Did they do it just on weekends?
Whenever they had weddings.
Yeah.
In most small towns, a wedding was a public event. There was no such thing as inviting only, quote-unquote, your friends. Everyone came to a wedding. Also, weddings lasted a longer time than they last today. Today, a wedding is over in 4 hours,
Yeah.
right? There, a wedding would take literally at least a month of preparation. and would often go on for a couple of days, because if you, in the olden times, I mean, traveling 50 miles was a major effort. And if you went, you didn't go for 4 hours, you spent a week. And it was quite common to have Sheva Barachas, the 7 blessings, go on for an entire week.
Yeah, you know, it seems so healthy that in the yeshivot, in the rabbinical seminaries that we picture as so austere and solemn, and probably to some degree they were, that on Purim, the world became topsy-turvy. And they made fun of the rabbis.
They would appoint a Purim rabbi, usually the least prestigious of the students would become the rabbi, and they would make fun of the Torah. It's a remarkable thing, Purim. Purim, as an institution, is quite remarkable. It's a shame. It's one of those holidays that has been made into a children's holiday. Oh, it's wonderful to put on masks for the kids. But adults don't really appreciate the fact that they're given license to enter into the flip side of reality for a little bit.
Yeah, well, the tradition says that when the Mashiach comes, only Purim will be left.
Yom Kippurim.
Right.
This is what Yom Kippur is all about.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that for a second. That is Purim the flip side of Yom Kippur?
Sure. A person who does Purim well is redeemed, is saved, because if you cannot be truly human. And this is something I'll be a bit philosophical for a while. You can't be truly human without a sense of humor. That's why I think humor is so important, because humor allows people to see your human side, your foibles, the side that is less than perfect. That's what makes us human, because we have, in Judaism particularly, we have no desire to be divine. We have no desire to be perfect, because there's no possibly perfect. So humor makes us aware of the fact that we are far from being perfect, that we're very human. So if you do Purim well, you will always know where you stand vis-a-vis other men and other women and God.
So you have 2 chances a year, Yom Kippur or Purim.
Yeah. I have friends who practice for Purim right after Yom Kippur. They start practicing for Purim.
Do you have your costume ready for this year's Purim?
Well, I went last year as Henry as Achashverosh the 8th. But I was thinking of going as a potted plant. I like this outfit. Who is this fellow anyway?
I think it's your date for tonight.
I see.
Let's talk about the Yiddish idiom. You know, when people talk about Jewish humor, they think of the Eastern European shtetl, either the humor that was the shtetl, I don't know how humorous it was, but the humor that was a shtetl, or the humorists who came from the shtetl, or the humorists who were nostalgic for the shtetl, or the jokes that have the Yiddish punchlines that the younger generation doesn't understand, right? So tell us about the Yiddish idiom as a conveyor of humor. Is it funnier in Yiddish than Hebrew or English?
Well, I think that's really something that we're trying to overcome in our book, is the need to know Yiddish in order to have good Jewish humor. I think when Jewish humor was primarily conveyed in Yiddish, it was much sharper and stronger because the non-Jews could understand it. See, that's really a very important point, is that why I think a lot of American Jewish humor became power in this country was there was a real fear on the part of American Jews who were trying very hard to become part of this great land, that if someone would say something critical, like Shlomo Lechem criticized what he saw in the community, if someone said that in English, and God forbid, it may bring on the wrath of the Gentiles. For instance, the reaction to Philip Roth in Portnoy's complaint, brouhaha, if you remember, right?
Sure.
And it wasn't because he talked about mothers and masturbation, because everybody has a mother, right? It was because he talked about Jewish superiority. He talked about the difference between Jews and non-Jews. Very frightening for the establishment community then. So they punished him, and they made him a millionaire, and he's been guilty ever since. If you read the last 3 books, he's guilty about making all that money on this book.
Do you think that, let's take Philip Roth, for instance.
Please.
Do you think Philip Roth, well, he did capture something of the American Jewish experience?
No question.
Okay. And was his sin that he was too correct?
Yes, no question about it, and wrote about it well, and I think he really, for instance, everybody sees that book as a book that's down on mothers, and it's not really. That's not the issue.
When you say that, when you say it's not down on mothers, what do you mean?
He reflects the strengths and the weaknesses of his mother, yes, but it is clearly the values of his mother is what he ultimately has to choose in order to survive.
Well, let's talk about Jewish mothers then, right? I mean,
there were no Jewish mother jokes in Eastern Europe, for instance.
Okay.
There were not.
Because the mother was so respected and idealized?
She was the economic base of the family.
So is it because there was so much respect for her in Eastern Europe, the wrath is being taken out on her in America, you think?
All right, there's a subtle psychological thing that Paula Hyman and her colleagues did in The Jewish Woman in America, which I sort of accept is probably one of the reasons for this. let's just try to understand. In 19th century Eastern Europe, in spite of the fact that we romanticize the shtetl, where it's very tough times, the shtetl was breaking down. If you read some of the writings of the time, you get a feeling that it's a lot like black writing in the early 50s and 60s. There are no men. The men are away. Shalom Aleichem is a great character, Menachem Mendel. Menachem Mendel's always on the road trying to make a deal. He's always worrying about getting home for Pesach, right? That was half the stories. Women, mothers, become central. They go to the marketplace, they bring money home, they feed you. You can make fun of God because God feeds the whole world, but your mother feeds you. You never made fun of your mother. You made fun of your mother-in-law. Thank God God made mothers-in-law. The immigrant comes to the United States in the 1880s, and the Jewish immigrant, and he's faced by something he's never seen before. A woman who is a tchotchke. You know, she wears an apron, she stands in the kitchen, she's often brought into the house to hold up plants, put on pedestals. The American woman of that age was you know, put on it was like the Gilded Age. And the woman was not a woman who was aggressive, who had to work and make a living. And this became, and you can talk about this and look in your own family, I'm sure you'll see it. The sign of success for American Jewish immigrants to America was what? That your wife didn't have to work.
But there's so much aggressiveness in Jewish humor against Jewish mothers, Jewish princesses.
Because Jewish mothers had to live vicariously through their sons. That the sign of male success became the sign that they accepted. And when you have to live through your children, you can become terribly overpowering because your child's success reflects totally on you. You don't have your own life.
We could go on for hours.
Yeah,
what I want to say is, first of all, I want to thank you. It's been just a great show having you here, and I'm sure you'll be the first to acknowledge it.
Oh, it's wonderful.
I want to
and I love the studio. It's sort of
I invite people to write to Hayom, care of WJUF, 1 South Franklin Street, Chicago, Illinois, 60606. I want to thank Moshe Waldoks. Please go get his book, The Big Book of Jewish Humor. It's just tremendous. And I'm going to ask you to end with a story. Would you do that?
This is an all-purpose joke. You can use this for any occasion. It's about an Orthodox Jew who, at the age of 75, begins a very terrible habit. He starts reading the New York Times every day, which gets him kind of depressed by the 6th month. And he begins to question his faith. Is there indeed reward and punishment? And he screams to God, and Orthodox Jews have many opportunities, at least 3 times a day. Rabbi Shalom, I have to have some reward in this world. Please let me win the New York State lottery. Well, this goes on for a month, morning, afternoon, and evening. After a while, he's doing midnight vigils, putting ashes on his head, sackcloth. Let me win the lottery. All I have to do, I'll die happy. I'll die with my faith affirmed. Goes on for 6 months. Finally, in his little prayer room on the Lower East Side of New York, a light, a voice, a bellowing, a sound, and God says, buy a ticket.